There is nothing like having those moments in your life where you realize you're not what you think you are. I remember I was like 21. I was driving my brother's car. I was in Edmonton. It was during winter. And so what do you do with someone else's car in winter? You find an open parking lot and you do donuts. That's what you do. And I had a few friends with me. It was like after this this Christmas event that went on. And so it's like, I was driving a car and no one else really had any. We were all college students, whatever. So it's like, let's just go do some donuts in a parking lot because that's what you do. You have to. And so we were doing it. And I remember, doing some in this parking lot that was by one of our apartments. And we're like, okay, we got time for one more. Always the one more does you in. And I did one more, and I went right into this concrete border, that they have that you can't see because it was full of snow. And I ran right into it. And I remember driving everyone back home, and I'm like, something's not right with this car. I don't want to tell my brother. Just so you know, my brother, my oldest brother, who I was living with at that time, is 6'2". And you're like, yeah, he is a mutant of the family. And he's 6'2", huge built guy. And so I was a little worried. I was like, I totally ruined his car. Luckily, he was working the oil field and he was gone for a couple of weeks. And so, but I get a phone call from him the next day. Hey, Thomas. Hey, what's up, Bern? I call him Bern. His name's Bernie. Bern. He's like, yeah, did you do something to the car yesterday? I'm like, what? No. And he's like, oh, that's weird because his wife, Vicky, she was actually driving to work and she's stranded on the Yellowhead with a car that won't go anywhere anymore. And I was like, oh, that's strange. How did that happen? I didn't mention that she was also 7 months pregnant. And so it's in that moment I'm like, maybe I'm not as good as a driver as I thought I was, right? Like, those moments in your life where you finally come to grips with like something about yourself. It's like when you go into the gym for the first time. Like, I'm going to get healthy, I'm going to be so good. And you walk in, you see people, and you're like, I am the worst person in the world. I will never be that person. I'll never be that person. And it seems like everyone's always looking at you, right? Like, is it too much to ask to just have the confidence of that guy I saw in the locker room blow drying his own butt hair? Like, can I just have, is it too much to ask just for that confidence, right? Because I realize you walk into the gym, maybe I'm not as confident as I thought I was, especially compared to that dude. We asked you this last week on our Instagram to just share words about who you thought you were. Describe yourself with one word, and some of you are like awkward, some of you are like awesome, some of you are like a little surprised. There's all these comments that came back, and the interesting thing about finding out about yourself is that it often takes a situation or someone else involved with your life to actually figure out who you are. Like, who are you? And you can have an idea of who you are until you're confronted with, you drove really poorly and you realize you're not that good of a driver. You went to the gym, I'm not that confident. These moments in your life that remind you maybe you're not who you think you are. The weird thing, though, is that sometimes it takes a bit of a breakdown. I don't share this lightly, but I know, just so you know, maybe for some of you here, so you don't feel so alone, is that there is not a week that goes by that I do not get an email from someone part of our community that's like, Thomas, I'm not doing okay. I thought everything was kind of lined up, everything was going the way it should be, but I've realized that I'm sick and I don't know what to do. And I'm stuck. It's almost like this out-of-body experience of I know I shouldn't feel like this, but I can't help but feel like this. There's a lot of people in our community that I think are struggling. And there's a lot of you that feel like you're alone. You need to know that I get consistent emails, and I have the privilege of being able to pastor as many as I can. I know I can't get to all, but as many as I can who are working through some of this and just even help them get along. But here's the reality. These are old statistics, but they don't change, is that in any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians experiences a mental health or addiction problem. Did you know that the highest number of mental illness and addiction happens within our age group? Not surprisingly then, by the time Canadians reach 40 years of age, 1 in 2 have or have had a mental illness. A survey found that 53% of participants said social media sites had changed their behavior, while 51% of these said the change had been negative. Furthermore, the survey revealed that 2/3 of participants reported difficulty relaxing and sleeping after they used these sites. Unfortunately, one of the ways that we're figuring out about who we are is actually by burnout and by confronting anxiety. You know, there was this time in our life where people said, you can be what you want to be, you can have what you want to have, and you know, and you can do what you want to do. And it sounded really great when you were 14 or 15 years old and you couldn't land a girl, right? But then you get old enough and you realize they lied to you. And the problem with those promises is that so many of us are trying to chase who we want to be, what we want to do, have what we want to have, and we're burning out because of it. And a lot of us are suffering. And sometimes the most complicated relationship we have in our life is not with anyone else, it's actually with ourselves. And this whole series, This Is Awkward, has to do with these complicated relationships that we have in our life that are really hard to focus on. And this month we want to start with a relationship with you, with yourself. We're going to be talking about the relationship with your parents next week, whether it's a good one or a strained one. Do you know one of the number one concerns that we get from people are just like, I don't know how to deal with my parents. The week after that, we're talking about dealing with people, or that complicated relationship with people that have hurt you. And then the complicated relationship with people that you just do not see eye to eye with. How do we work through these things? The reality is that our life is all about relationships. And so today, we wanted to get into the concept of how do you deal with this complicated relationship with yourself. And I want to go to this story. It's found in the Bible, in the Old Testament, which is kind of the first half of the Bible, if you're not familiar with the Bible. And there's a book called 1 Kings. It comes before 2 Kings. And there's no 3rd Kings, so don't worry about it. And it goes through some of the history of these people, the Israelites, the people of God, and talks about some of the issues that they ran into. And we come upon chapter 17 to 19, and it's a part of the story of this guy named Elijah. And I want to kind of catch you up with the story before we kind of get into it, but just to give you a bit of a highlight. So this guy, he actually foretold that there would be a drought in the land. God had said, because he was someone who God spoke to. And he had said to people, to the king, he said to the nation, listen, you're going to go through tons of drought. And what happened was that drought did come. And then during the drought, God said, don't worry about it, Elijah. I will send a raven to give you water, something to drink, and will deliver pampas to you, right to you. And that's what happened. He literally brought, there's a brook to drink from, and the raven would bring meat to him, which sounds pretty awesome, right? Like this is like the first skip the dishes that you don't have to pay for. And then he finds this widow in the same chapter, and the widow's running out of oil. At that point, a widow would have been probably one of the least able person to provide for themselves at this point in history. And he says, here's what I want you to do. And she fills these jars, and she ends up having enough oil and enough supplies to last her the entire drought. There's this huge miracle. And then if that didn't help, her son died. And of course, Elijah just brings him back to life. And this is actually the first recorded time that someone's brought back to life in the Bible. And Elijah does it. He brings him back to life. Then he goes to this king, King Ahab, and he says, listen, you've got all these idols that you're worshiping, and I bet you my God can defeat them. And so he basically says, let's have a bit of a showdown. All your gods, all your people, all your prophets versus my one God. And so they kind of face off. And the idea is that 450 prophets of Baal show up. And the deal is, let's prepare a sacrifice, and whoever's God answers by fires, there's the one true God. And so they do everything they can do. After taunting the prophets of Baal, after having them be so desperate, they even cut themselves. After them seeing nothing, Elijah does this. In a drought, he pours tons of water on his altar. Tons of it. He prays. He says one prayer. And it says that the fire of God literally came down, flashed down from heaven, burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and cried out, the Lord, he is God. Yes, the Lord is God. This is some pretty incredible life events. If you were able to be listen, a bird gave me food, I raised someone from the dead, and I called fire down from heaven, and be I want to be your friend, right? This is a good thing, because I got a few people that I need to call thunder from heaven down on, right? All these good things are happening. And then it says that he actually sprints back into town faster than a chariot. And we find ourselves in 1 Kings 19, verses 2-5. And there's this lady named Jezebel and finds out what happens, that he had literally all these prophets were all killed. She finds out what happens and she sends this message to Elijah. I've had maybe it came out of order. May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that one of them. All these good things happen. Then all of a sudden Jezebel sends this message, I'm going to get you. If by this time tomorrow, she actually makes, the way that this is formed, it's actually a life and death oath. She's making a life and death oath. I am making an oath that if you are not dead by tomorrow, there's going to be a problem. And so he does what most of us probably would do. Well, he was afraid and he ran for his life, actually. He ran from his life. So all these things that were happening, all these miracles, he ran for his life out of that place as fast as possible. He went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he may die. He says this, I've had enough, Lord. He said, take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. So we have all these amazing, miraculous ways that heaven met earth. Elijah did these crazy things that literally only God could have done, and he experienced all this, and he was a conduit over it. And then some woman says, I'm going to kill you, and he runs away, and he's like, God, kill me today. It's interesting. I remember it was like 26 or 27, and I was doing really good at my job. I had 2 kids at the time. I was married and things were going really well. But I remember driving home from work one day, and it was later on in the night, and I realized that I felt no emotion. I felt so empty. I was like at the top of my game, and I felt like I could not conjure up an emotion. I was literally so dead inside. And it started a long process of working through depression. And sometimes it's not some lady calling death on you. Sometimes it's like, it's a deadline you got to meet. Sometimes it's a word you hear from someone that just like takes you down enough notches. Sometimes it's an event that happens, something that kind of surprises you, and you go from this moment of okay to then not being okay. The thing about depression, anxiety, and burnout, it's no respecter of persons. I don't care who you are in this room. It's no respecter of person. And what I want to do tonight is show you how God responded and helped Elijah. Through his burnout, through his depression. And I think Elijah's life gives us a bit of clues, though, first, as to how he got there. Like, I know there's so many reasons. And so I'm not giving you all the clues. I'm giving you a few clues. And some things that I notice a lot in our lives, and a lot of the conversations I have with you and the conversations I have with myself. And how God met Elijah in that place as he slid into burnout, slid into depression, where he literally just wanted to die. And the thing is, when you read the story, you find that this isn't just like some, thing where he's saying, oh, I just wish I could die. No, there was this point of his life where he literally wanted God to erase him from the history of God's people. Just wanted to disappear. There's a few things we notice, though. If you read the story in chapter 19, you read in verse 4, it says, then he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he may die. Here's something you got to notice. Elijah literally wore himself out, which, just so you know, is a trigger to burnout, to depression, to anxiety. He literally was worn out. He'd gone from one experience to another. Then he literally didn't stop there. He literally ran faster than a chariot. He just went and went and went. And there's probably the sense where he felt like he needed to do all these things. But here's the thing, this is actually how many of us live our lives. We live in the sense where it's like busy is like the new Beyonce, right? Like it's just, busy. How you doing? I'm busy. Oh yeah, I get it. Mm-hmm. Right? Like we all do it. And it's not even worth asking. How you do? Busy. I knew it. It's the new thing. It's the sexy part of it. It's just like, if you're not busy, then what are you doing with your life? We run rampant. Work, school, church. Maybe it's just like, it's relationships. It's just things. We just keep going. We keep pushing. We keep pushing. We keep pushing. And then being able to actually establish some sort of identity among all these things. And then we have technology that keeps us constantly thinking about who we are and what we're doing and how people are liking us, how people are not. And so we think we're relaxing in front of our phone, but it's actually demanding so much more of us. And the thing is that it doesn't always come out of a bad time. Yeah, there's some bad things that happen that slide us into these places, but sometimes it's actually a series of really good things that happen and we're just burnt out. Sometimes it's, you graduate. This is why, a lot of people that get sick after they graduate or after the semester ends. Because you run so rampant through the semesters that you just don't have time to be sick. And your body has this weird way of knowing it. And then you come out of exams or finals and you're just like, I'm sick as a dog. Why do I have a flu at the end of April? Because you just worn yourself out. You graduate, you get a job, you want to travel. And the problem with when it happens to good things, we feel a lot of shame because it's like, how dare I feel like the way I do? I mean, look at all these good things that have happened. Shouldn't I feel like #blessed? Like, shouldn't I, the problem is that it doesn't matter. If you've got a series of really good things or a series of really bad things, burnout is burnout. Depression is depression. Then we see Elijah do something which is also unhealthy. Verse 3, we read, Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. He actually abandoned his closest person, his friend. He went alone. Some of us do the same when we get overwhelmed. We kind of shut people out, whether it's because of shame or embarrassment, or we just feel like they don't understand, they'll never get it. How dare I be a weight on them? And there's this way where we kind of like cocoon ourselves in this idea that we should be alone, that we should suffer by ourselves. And oftentimes in these points of burnout, we don't reach out. And we think that talking about things minimizes our strength. No, it's dumb to do. And we think vulnerability is weakness. We think sharing is some sort of way of copping out where it's not. And we get this idea that we shouldn't say anything. And this is exactly what Elijah does. Not only does he run himself ragged, he leaves the very closest people in his life behind. And some of you are starting to shut yourself out to people. And you may be hanging out with them. It doesn't mean that you're not hanging out with them. It may mean that you're actually hanging out with them, but you're not being honest with where you're at. How you doing? Oh man, I'm doing so good. Everything's going so well. And on the inside, like, you're a mess. On the inside, like, you're doing terrible. But you're like, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's awesome. Right? Like, and there's this inner person in you being like, liar, right? And you're just like, shh, quiet. It doesn't mean not seeing them. It just means that you don't let them see you. And here's my encouragement. If you're a friend to anyone in your life, you need to ask if your friends are okay. Sometimes, if you've been in this spot, it takes so much energy just to say you're not okay. And part of being a really good friend is asking the hard questions like, are you okay? Maybe it's not like every time we get together. But like it'd be really healthy for you, maybe once a month, to schedule a moment where you're like, hey, are you doing okay? No, like I mean it seriously, are you okay? Because I care about you. Oftentimes we find out about this stuff way too late. The third thing he does is he lies under the broom tree and he says this, I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors who've already died. He's like, take my life. I am no better than just being dead like them. I am worth nothing. He became so hyper-focused on the negative that he allowed it to turn into self-pity. And the problem with self-pity is that when it begins to take over, it always exaggerates. I'm never going to be any good. I will always be stuck. I doubt I'll ever get through all seasons of The Office. You will. Just keep pushing through it. You got this. Self-pity exaggerates. And I'm not, I'm careful self-pity because there's a part of self-pity that's actually not on you. Self-pity happens when we allow it to take over in our negative thoughts, and then we kind of run with it. Yeah, I'm not that great. Yeah, I'll never do that. I'll never be this. I'll never be that. I'll never attain this. Look at what I've done. And it begins to exaggerate your life. And here's the thing, this is actually what the enemy wants to do. We believe in this enemy. There's this world beyond just the flesh and blood. And it says that this whole reason for existence is to steal, kill, and destroy. And so he'll say things that sound like this. This is not where you need to be. This won't ever work out, and you need to give up. Or you're not going to make it through this. It's too hard. It hurts too bad, and you can't control it. It's just who you are. You are helpless. You are a victim of circumstance. You'll never change it. You're not worthy. You're not good enough, and you can never forgive yourself for that. They will never accept you. You can never be loved, and you will never be satisfied. I mean, I can keep going on and on and on. I'm sure many of you have played these things over your head because his raison d'etre is to steal, kill, and destroy you. To interrupt peace between you and God, you and yourself, and you and other people. And when we slide into this, it's so easy to slide into this method of thinking. And it's so hard to get out of it. When you look at his life, he went without stopping. He isolated himself and let thoughts develop into self-pity. And how God dealt with depressed Elijah gives us actually some really big hope. He didn't have any hope left. He's literally hiding out. He's wanting to die. And what happens next? It's actually pretty interesting. You don't hear God preach at him. You don't hear God saying, he's like, well, if you just believed harder. Well, maybe Elijah, you got some sin in your life. Elijah, looks like you're not reading the Bible enough. Elijah, it wasn't really that big. Did you believe harder for me? You actually don't read any of that in this story. God doesn't chastise him. He doesn't preach a sermon at him. There's no rebuke. He's not like you need more faith. I think that's what a lot of us believe. Is that something's wrong with us if something happens like that. But you don't hear that from this story whatsoever. In fact, what you read is actually very interesting. It says this. And at once an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. And the angel asked him to do this numerous times. Do you know what God asked Elijah to do? Was to just take a break, y'all. Eat something. You hangry. You're sleep deprived. You've been running yourself ragged and you think you can't take a break. Who do you think you are? He recognized his depression was real and it wasn't an imaginary problem. And so God met him as a whole person. And he said, you need to eat and you need to sleep. And he needed to do this for a little while. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you and I can do is actually to rest. It's not another meaning. It's not another Bible verse. Not another coping mechanism. It's to sleep. It's to rest. It's to eat. Truly, one of the most common miscommands of God is to honor him with this thing called Sabbath, which literally means rest. And I don't mean escaping. A lot of people are like, man, I can't wait to escape this. I want to go someplace and all you're doing is actually just running away from your problems. You know the only problem with running away with the problems is that the same person ends up there too. It may be a different location, but it's the same person that ends up there. And a lot of people are about escapism. That's not the idea. Retreating, Sabbath means I need to recognize what's going on, and I need to recognize that I am a whole person, and maybe I need to sleep and eat and rest. And here's what stopping and resting can also do. We want God or others to tell us how we're doing, and that's okay. We need that. How am I doing? How do you think I'm doing? Am I okay? Like, we're always looking for that kind of confirmation. But without taking deliberate, regular moments to rest and to self-reflect, we can actually miss early warning signs of trouble. Here's the thing. Why we hate taking a break, why we hate self-reflection, is the exact reason why we need it. It's like knowing there's a small leak in your basement, but going, if I don't look at it, it'll go away. Some of you have a small leak in your life, and you've not paid attention to it, and you've not dealt with it, and it's now caused a huge problem. Mental, personal, relational, and spiritual health, which is pretty much sensitivity, always has guardrails. Guardrails are these things on the side of the road that if you've not hit one before, that's good. But what you'll notice is that guardrails are actually never in the ditch. They're to keep you out of the ditch. But so often we run our lives so ragged that the bumpy ditch is all we know. And you've been desensitized to the warning signs that your body's been sending you that things are not okay. And we always ride in that time. And when we rest and retreat, we begin to realize, oh my goodness, this is not normal life. I shouldn't be in the ditch. You begin asking yourself really good questions, and you're starting to see, oh my goodness, like, I can't run my life like this. I wouldn't want anyone to run their life like this. And it begins to sensitize you again to these guardrails. So let me tell you a few warning signs of knowing whether you're riding in the rut. One, you've been depressed for 2 or more weeks. It's beginning to impact your work, like you're not wanting to show up, or you just don't care, and you're unmotivated, and it's unlike you. Some of you are like, I'm always unmotivated at work, right? So maybe you're normal, right? If it's like not normal, you fantasize about hurting others or yourself. People are worried about you, like keep asking, are you okay? Are you doing? Yeah, why do you keep asking me? It's a sign. It affects your physical health. You're no longer enjoying the things you used to. You self-medicate with drugs and or alcohol. You can't get out of bed. You have suicidal thoughts or thoughts of self-harm. No one wants to say yes to any of those things. But what I'm telling you is when you say yes to those things, it's the first step to actually finding healing. When you own it. Self-reflection with good, healthy boundary questions can help us resensitize us, to keep us sensitive to how we're doing and how others in our life may be doing. They help us go back in within the guardrails so that we know when we're rubbing up against them and we need to take a break and we need to step back and realize what's going on, how are things happening, how do I do better? And the thing is often we find God speaking in these moments. There's this moment where God asks him to go to this mountain, and I'm going to get there in a second here, but he says, go up to this mountain, and I want to meet you there. And so he goes there, and what's interesting, if you read the passage, it's like, go out and stand before me on this mountain, the Lord told him. And as Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by, and a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that the rocks were torn loose, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was the sound of a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And then after that moment, just going to get there in a second, a question is asked of Elijah. A lot of us want these big moments where God's to show up. A lot of us even go to experience, spiritual experience, a spiritual experience. We go to another worship event, we go to another prayer thing, we want all these experiences. Here's the thing, Elijah had all those experiences. He literally raised someone from the dead. He literally called fire down. He foretold a drought. Some of you can't foretell what you're gonna eat tomorrow morning. The thing about experiences are great, they show you God, but experiences of God are not actually intimate. And God is teaching Elijah and he's teaching us. Don't go for the experiences of my power. I want you to come into an intimate relationship with me. I'm not in the loud spaces where you're looking for me. And I think we do. Sometimes we look for the loud spaces everywhere, but in retreat. And it's in these places that I think God speaks. And this is what Elijah gets asked. What are you doing here, Elijah? What a great question. When God speaks, he says this, Elijah, what are you doing here? What a great question to ask when you self-reflect and you ask yourself this question, what are you doing here? What in whatever state you're in, what are you doing here? This powerful question is asked to Elijah, what are you doing here? Have you asked yourself this question? Who are you? What are you doing here? It wasn't an earthquake, it wasn't in the wind, it wasn't in the fire, it was in this small, gentle whisper. What are you doing here? some of us live lives so loud that maybe God is drawing us into this quiet to hear him speak intimately to us. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank. Sanctified by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. Now, the significance of Mount Horeb is that this is where God said a lot of things to the Israelites. So he's basically like, I want you to go back to something that's familiar. He basically sends them to church in a sense. Some of you have these experiences with God, and I ask people, it's like, how do I connect with God? And I'm like, well, it's actually fairly personal. Where do you feel closest with God? For me, it's like when I read certain books, because I'm a super nerd, and when I read certain books, I'm like, I feel close to God. And when I feel like there's a disconnection, that's where I go. For some of you, it's in nature. For some of you, it's doing certain things, but there is a sense where like, where do you feel close to God? Go to that place. That's what he's telling Elijah. Go to the place where you feel close to God. Come to a point where I can speak to you. And then he says, if you were to go to verse 13, if the angel asks the same question over and over again, what are you doing here? Elijah gives the same answer. He says, I've been very zealous for the Lord. The Israelites have rejected your covenant. Both of those are true. They've broken down your altars, which is also true, and put your prophets to death. That is true. But I'm the only one left. That was false. And now they're trying to kill me too. Well, that was true. In the midst of all of the truth, there was a lie Elijah was believing. In his answers, we see in the midst of the truth, Elijah was believing a lie, that he was the only one left, that he's doing all the work, that he's the only one that cares, and I'm the only one that can get this done. That it all depends on you. And if you were to continue to read, God says, actually, there are like 7,000 other people. So that's more than one. Some of you feel like if you take a break, if you're not doing well, that you have to keep going because the world's going to fall apart. I'm here to tell you you're not alone. And I'm here to tell you that God is bigger than your fear. And one of the things we need to do is we need to deal with the lies that we're believing. We need to name that lie. And we need to be thinking of the truth. And the weird thing is that if someone else in our life was saying these things, we'd be like, you're crazy. You'll find another job. You're crazy. You're not a failure. You had a mess up. You're not a failure. This doesn't define you, but we can't say that to ourselves. And there can be a lot of truths about your situation, that things are going wrong, that you wish had gone differently. Yeah, those are all true. It means we can say like, well, this is what's going to be my life. No, that is a lie. And in those moments, God speaks truth. And sometimes he speaks truth through other people being like, no, you're okay. Let me help you get through this. But if you don't reach out to God, if you don't reach out to other people, these lies will compound in your life. Some of us are down because we feel like we'll be alone for the rest of our lives. This will always be the same thing. I can tell you through experience that it doesn't always have to be like this. Fourth thing is that the last thing God did for Elijah is he gave him something to do. He says, I want you to go and I want you to anoint these people, and I can't pronounce their names very well because I'll butcher them. Go anoint these people. Just go and do it. He gives them something to do. He meets with them, he speaks to them, he identifies the lies, and he says, here, I've got more for you to do. There's something for you to do. And when you feel hopeless and down, you feel like you're useless. And I'm here to tell you that God is not done with you. That he has more for you, that he created you as a masterpiece and a way of using you to unfold what he's doing here on earth. And nothing that he wants to do in you or through you is dependent on you, but all about him. And he's okay. And he wants to use you. He wants to make sure you know that you are not useless, you are useful. Make sure that you're not a mistake, but that you were created with intention and with wonder. That you may be in this room thinking to yourself, I am useless in this state, and God is saying, no, No, I want to meet with you. I want you to hear my voice. I want you to know that I want to have an intimate relationship with you. And I want you to know that whatever is crooked in your life, I can make straight. But more than that, I can use your life because you are more than what you feel right now. Dr. Carl Menninger, he said this: lock up your house, go across the tracks if you've got tracks in front of your house. Find somebody in need and help that person. To overcome discouragement, don't focus on yourself. Get involved in the lives of other people. Part of finding health through burnout and depression is sorting through your emotion and identifying them. And I'm not saying that you should work to a point of further burnout, but to also recognize that there's other people that maybe your story can benefit as well. And sometimes I tell people, if sometimes the only thing you do is just say hello to someone or smile at someone, maybe that's all you can do, but do that. It doesn't have to be huge. But here's some things you can do to help you stay on the right path. And I'm going to end it here. There's a few things I want to encourage you to do every day, to think through every week and every month, because you've got a lot of decisions to make: where you're going to go to school, what you're going to do for work, who you're going to want to marry, why they don't want to marry you, and how you're going to convince them to do it anyways. And, there's like, why do I keep getting ghosted? What, there's a lot of things. Sorry, it was my life. And so, what do you do? How do you stay healthy? How do you make sure that you stay, like I said, sensitive to those guardrails in your life and make sure that you stay in a healthy spot? And again, this is not a full out list, but can I just share a few encouragement for you, the things that I've instilled, things I've encouraged others, and that I've done research and read through. Here's some things that can help you out. The first thing is this: relationships are key. Not all of them. Some people do not need to know what's going on in your life, because some of them are terrible at it. And sometimes it's really hard to tell someone, listen, this is what I'm going through, and they're like, I don't know what to do. I'd say this: surround yourself with a person or persons who you have deep relationship with. Studies have shown that to help yourself reconnect with yourself is being able to connect to a place of belonging. And you find best belonging with the people you have the deepest relationships with. It reminds you that you're part of something bigger, that people do love you, people do care about you, and that they are thinking about you. So know who to share your struggles with. Call someone to go for a coffee. Make them pay for it. I get the hint, Andrew. So find someone you can have deep relationship with. The second thing is this: get moving. This is really important. Exercise, Annie, is proven time and time again to help relieve the feelings associated with anxiety and depression. Better yet, do it outdoors. Get outside, do something, get your body moving. You don't have to be like Mr. and Mrs. Olympia. You don't, like run a triathlon. It's like you haven't run a mile, but you're running for 10. No, just be outside, take a walk, do something. Get yourself outside, get moving, get your body moving. And part of that is watch what you eat. Maybe not all the time, but find particular moments in the day where you're watching what you're eating to just help yourself. And maybe you need help doing that, because I know it takes so much energy to even do something simple like that. But find one meal you have control over in your day, just one, and start there. Third, journal. It increases your self-awareness and your ability to identify what you're feeling. Journaling actually allows the emotion to run through you. It helps you get it through you and to work through it and the experiences to pass through you. It actually helps you mourn. Journaling is the most awkward thing I can do, but it has so helped me. Journal. It lets things pass through you. Fourth is really good self-care. What makes you feel great? What do you love doing? Do that. But there's this one question that I think you can ask yourself, and it's this: what can I do today that tomorrow me will thank me for? I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer that question right here. Go for it. If you were in that moment feeling super awkward, that's actually a very good sign that you don't take enough time in your life to be alone. What can I do today that tomorrow me will thank me for? Super easy question. Pray. Studies have actually shown that people who pray are more securely able to navigate their emotions than those who don't. It's a form of self-reflection, of giving things away. It increases mindfulness. But not only that, we believe that we pray to a God who hears us. And whether you subscribe to Jesus or not, I'd encourage you to pray, to give it to God. All your anger, all your emotions. He's not worried. He's not like, whoa, how'd you learn those words? He's not surprised by it. Read the book, the Psalms. It's like every emotion is in there. Anger, frustration, confusion. Give it all. Pray. Pray. And get help if you need it. You've heard me say this before. Every young adult by the age of 25 should see a counselor. If not, you're doing life wrong. Everybody needs a checkup from the neck up. Sounds corny, but will stay with you forever. See a counselor, psychologist. I would say that when you have a bunch of hurts in your life and you never work through them, you only work around them, you actually never mature beyond that hurt. And you know this when something happens and you're reminded exactly of that and you go back to those emotions and those thoughts and you're reminded, I have not dealt with that. So you just keep sweeping it under the rug. Whether you had a great life or a hard life, by the age of 25, every single person should have gone to see some counselor. Even if it's just once. Do it. Find a good one. In fact, there are some options for you. And you can take a picture of this. I'll put it up after the next slide here, but we want you to find help. We want you to reach out. There's a lot of you that have emailed me, hey, where can I go? And I've sent you recommendations because I believe in this stuff. I go see a counselor. I do. I want to make sure I'm healthy, not just for myself, but for you guys and for my wife and for my kids. And I want to be healthy. Seek help if you really need it. If you can't help yourself, find help. If you're here tonight, and just the idea and the concept of Jesus is something that you're maybe interested in, you want to find out more about. The thing about following Jesus is that he doesn't say, come, believe everything I say. He says, come and follow, which means come watch, come learn, come belong. And one of the ways we help people do that, just start that journey, is literally just by texting 555-888, that word next. Something's going to be sent to you, and just a way for you to start that journey. And there's a lot of people who have started that journey with Jesus by just starting there. That's why the project exists. That's why we're here. The complicated relationship with you. Let's pray. God, I thank you that through all this, we're not alone. You are with us. But not only that, there's a room full of people who are probably facing similar situations. God, help us to know that you meet with us, that you don't preach at us. You meet us where we're at. You come down into our hurts, into our pain, and you speak. Help us to hear you. Help us to recognize you. God, help us to recognize people in our life who may be hurting. Help us to be the kind of friend that offers belonging and help and hope. And all of this, I pray, Holy Spirit, you give us the strength to do something that feels almost impossible to do. Jesus, that we would not lose hope, but we would know that, God, you are the God of hope. That where there's death, that is where you produce the best kind of life. Amen. Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for hanging out. See you next week as we continue our series. Have a good one, guys.